Before we begin this challenge, I would like to thank each and every single one of you for 10,000 subscribers. When I started out this channel, I wouldn't have thought I would be able to get like 1 subscriber. But seriously, thank you to each and every single one of you for helping me get to this point in time, point in our journey, point in insert word, however you want to call it. As you have seen by the title, we are attempting to do the 2 Megapops achievement, but with the base mortar, which means it's got to be a mortar monkey, which is a tier 2 or below when it comes to upgrades. Now, has the scenario been fun for me post recording? It depends on how you view the word fun. The first thing we need to consider is what map are we going to be selecting, and honestly I think there are only really 2 maps in which I can look at when it comes to even possibly attempting to get 2 million pops with the base mortar: Cubism and Resort. Logs has its own reasons as to why I'm not selecting it, but it's mainly down to trying to buff your base mortar with a alchemist, and it's always guaranteeing to steal pops. I've chosen Cubism because on the bottom left you can place down Striker Jones, which is going to be our hero of support, and the top right we hope to be able to hide our overclock engineers so that doesn't steal any pops. We start our journey with a monkey sub for 2 reasons. Number 1, we need to get early pops in order to purchase our mortar monkey and everything else after that. And then number 2, we need to submerge it so that it doesn't steal any more pops, alongside being able to decamo any balloons which go along near it or in it. I did find round 8 to be a bit of a roadblock, but with some optimization I was able to get through that round with an unupgraded sub. From there we placed our mortar monkey down, and then after that we placed down Striker Jones a few rounds later. I did find round 19 to be incredibly challenging because I was trying to do this as steelless as possible for the early game, which is why I only used the mortar in order to clear out round 19, which took a lot of optimizing with the mortar's targeting. Round 20 presented us with our first black balloons, which the mortar cannot pop at this given point in time. Round 21 was much more difficult than round 19, so we also had to use the sub in order to help us get along that round. On round 25 we've reached the maximum number of upgrades that we can get for our mortar. Getting an alchemist to buff our mortar is going to really help out with DPS alongside attack speed, or if for some odd reason at strongest stimulant it does increase the mortar's damage by 2, but it still is only at 1. The 30s were honestly pretty chill in comparison to the early game. For round 40 we got a jungle drums village in order to increase the attack speed of our mortar and also take down the Moab as well with the help of both our village and the alchemist. Round 48 presents us with fortified ceramics, which is the first hurdle in the 40s because it requires multiple shells in order to get through that fortified ceramic layer. On round 49 we place down our engineer on the top right of Cubism, hoping that it won't steal any pops from Moabs. But you'll find out later that that is not a good spot for it. The deconstruction does +1 damage to Moabs and +1 damage to fortifieds, but have them both on board and that's +2 damage. And sometimes you get even more damage because of glue strike. Rounds with multiple Moabs can be a pickle because you really need to try and focus your aim on as many Moabs as you possibly can with your mortar shells. Otherwise you're wasting potential with each shell by not landing them on every Moab on the round, but obviously that's impossible to do at all times, as you can see. Getting both a Moab glue alongside a glue strike glue gunner will help us out when it comes to both gluing Moabs alongside being able to do more damage against everything that's been struck by a glue strike. You may think it's only +2 damage, but you're talking about a tower that only does 3 damage per shell, so it's more than worth it. With a combination of Moab glue to slow down the BFB, the glue strikes will provide us with more damage, alongside the alchemist for more damage, and the village for more attack speed. The base mortar is able to take down the BFB on round 60. Round 62, however, that was a big hurdle. Fortified Moabs are no joke. Yes, they don't have as much RBE as regular BFBs do, but the speed in which they go at definitely makes them a much more of a threatening presence. Round 63 was the doddle. We've got explosives, and explosives are usually renowned for having high pierce. 64 wasn't as challenging as 62 because all of the Moabs are grouped together rather than separated out. Round 65 with 2 BFBs and multiple Moabs was definitely a challenge, but it wasn't something that was too hard to fathom out. Round 72 provided us with regrowth farm opportunities to earn a little bit more cash. Round 75 was a huge hurdle. Spaced out fortified Moabs and a few groups of clumped up BFBs definitely doesn't make it for a fun time whatsoever, and there's certainly a lot of fun in this scenario. We cleared it though, and just like round 63, round 76 was no challenge whatsoever. Round 77 was definitely a hurdle. It's similar to round 75 where we have a lot of BFBs around, but they're more clumped together, which makes them easier to handle. Round 78 wasn't a hurdle at all because you can keep your cursor on the BFB and glue strike the huge hordes of ceramics, and you'll be able to go through that round with no problem. But next up is round 79. After round 62, I knew that probably one of the biggest hurdles in which we need to overcome are fortified BFBs. We only have the Moab glue to help us out when it comes to slowing them down, but the other option would be to send out concussive shells from Striker Jones, which is obviously very risky because that steals a lot of pops alongside the already amount of pops in which the engineer has already stolen from us. With a fair few concussive shells and some microing with the mortar, we managed to make our way crawling through round 79. But now round 80 is here and we have ourselves a huge barrier. The ZOMG. I needed an absolute 0 by the time round 82 comes around. And I cannot for the life of me, regardless of what kind of microing I put down, am able to defeat the ZOMG because the insides of it always crept through the snowstorm ice tower which I placed at the end of a track for insurance purposes. Like, you need something like that at the end of a track in order to stall the smaller balloons from being able to get to the end of a track, but unfortunately I just could not do it, so I had to get a Sabo, which I didn't want to do in order to go through that, and I knew that from that point onwards, going through round 80, placing down that ninja, being further away from an absolute 0 upgrade, I knew that my chances were just so slim now. Eventually, after a lot of time has passed, I have managed to beat round 80, but now 3 play rounds and super ceramics. I knew that my chances were so slim now because I had to further delay getting the absolute 0 upgrade in order to permanently slow down my class balloons on the screen. And being further away from it means that my chances were going from slim to 0, and constantly using Jones's concussive shells in order to slow down certain Moabs on the screen, alongside all of the steals in which the engineer has performed on the top right hand corner of the screen, which visually looks like a spot in which would not get any steals, but obviously because of the long range of the engineer, along with a range bug that is within the game since like the early 30s or even like the late 20s, I do not see this being a possibility for the 220 Mortar. Like, I've tried a lot throughout the 80s, and to be honest, there are so many rounds in there where I had to constantly rely on Jones in order to slow down the Moabs enough, alongside the Sabos to slow down the Moabs, that and also just like with the snowstorm at the back, with the ninjas there, just either chucking them back or just like freezing the balloons or even like popping the balloons outright. I just knew that there were so many steals within this point that there was just no point of no return. Like, my setup is obviously not sufficient for this, and I either have to resort, wink wink, to a different map or just give this up altogether, because the more ideal spot for the engineer is where Striker Jones is on the map. But obviously Striker Jones is occupying that part of the map in which we desperately need Jones for, because Jones is actually much more of a dangerous presence when it comes to steals, because he does far more damage than the engineer does later on in the game. Forming an ice bridge which allows land towers to be on water using the middle path ice tower. I know that just from the costs alone will make this run impossible because we are getting our overclock engineer later on in the run. So I knew that that was not an option because I really wanted to get our engineer to the bottom right of the map so that then it doesn't steal from the top right of the map, but then it could also just steal pops from Moabs anyways when the engineer is at the bottom right, but you have to use several thousands of money which you would otherwise invest in a Moab glue or a glue strike and the overclock itself. So I just knew that Cubism was not going to be the map, and I think it is definitely solely down to my setup alongside the engineer constantly stealing pops from the top right hand side of the map. Why is that spot annoying for us? Mainly for this purpose sort of thing. You have to place the engineer somewhere else on this map. And other maps are just not that much better, alongside the fact that there's not enough space in order for your mortar to be able to do enough damage to Moab so that then they can be popped. So I experimented with Resort, and there is something about the parasol at the bottom which is very interesting. Some points in time, if you place down your engineer at the right angle, the parasol itself blocks the nail gun of the engineer. So there are a few times in which the engineer may not be able to damage any targets. And I've found out that it can't damage regular balloons at a specific angle. And most of the time it can't damage a Moab. Although I found on round 75 that fortified Moabs can still be damaged, but then again it could just be down to the timing of the attack. And I just find that also placing the engineer on last means that it's got the maximum amount of chances for its nail gun to hit the parasol, removing the projectile altogether. This is mainly apparent on like moon landing, where if you place your tower at a specific angle, it can't hit inside a crater because it's hitting the crater itself rather than going into the crater. Because Striker Jones needs to be at a specific angle by the tree on the bottom left of it so that it doesn't steal any pops later on, specifically like rounds 98. It's got to be very precise, otherwise it will steal pops if Moabs are close enough to each other, bunched up near each other, because that kind of increases the hitbox of a particular Moab if a lot of them are bunched up together. The only downside with Resort though is that we cannot buff our mortar using the proximity of Jones, because we need to put the alchemist in a spot where it's not going to steal too many pops, and we need it in a spot where it's not going to make contact with any regular balloons, although it still has a chance to do that if you pop a Moab which has received enough damage from either your alchemist or other attacks, which then that potion just flies towards the ceramics anyways. Not good times, especially under the influence of a glue strike. And honestly, the top right little box on Resort is heaven for anything like that. For your mortar shells, for your attack shooter, for your ice tower, for sworder, any short-ranged attacks or anything with a blast radius really excels at that particular spot on the map. I would say that is probably the best spot to utilize any kind of tower like that within the entire game. Not even a question. We made it all the way through just like we did on Cubism, but round 75. I had to have an extra Moab glue just so that we can glue balloons early enough on the map, but by having 2 Moab glues and a glue strike means that we cannot purchase our quarter arms for round 75, in which we desperately needed it. I fumbled and stumbled on this round for hours, and I couldn't do it. I could not for the life of me fathom out on how to do this particular round. Even though we did it on Cubism, the layout of Cubism means that the glue gunner can hit early in the map, middle of the map, late in the map when it comes to the balloon's journey towards the end. Whereas with Resort, it's much more, well, it's not much more spaced out, but it's a bit more spaced out to a point where you can't really utilize the Moab glue's potential, so therefore you have to use 2 of them in order for them to be as stuck as possible, minus the bottom portion of resort. Not fun times. So in all honesty, after hours of attempts around 75, I should have just brought one Moab glue, but I ended up with two because I felt like I really needed that second one near the start. I just knew that I wasn't capable of doing this, despite the fact that if you look up on Bloons Tower Defense 6, I have multiple records of shell shock 2 Megapops and heavy shells 2 Megapops, but you would think that I could be a good candidate to try and get a base mortar 2 Megapops. But there's obviously something which I am missing when it comes to this game in order to be able to go through this scenario. Now, two things that I could change up is my strategy. Number one, I could use Geraldo as my hero so that then I could get Jerry's Fire to help us out, alongside using a Condor, which a lot of people suggest, but the Condor I find is really random when it comes to its damage. I feel like there's like a range in which its damage is projected at, and unfortunately if your balloon is weak enough, it will actually just pick up one Moab rather than a BFB with a group of Moabs. So you actually lose out on a huge amount of pops and trying to keep track of what balloons are weak enough to be able to be downscaled into a Moab. And obviously the Condor bug where it picks up a BFB, but it only places down one Moab. That's a lot of pops just disappeared altogether. I don't like that, which is why I've never really used Condor in any of my 2 Megapops videos, because it's a really, really high tier tower to utilize. You just need to know how much RBE is left within your mobs which you have on the field, which is why I resent Condor. So unfortunately for me, my journey on a official map for base mortar 2 Megapops is now complete. Complete as in we failed to do this. On Cubism, I gave up really conserving my pops from round 82 onwards, just because if I held back with concussive shell, I knew that the fortified BFBs would just get too far. And then I really, through the 80s, just really struggled with the base mortar. Around 90 DTs were not too hard at all, because you can just use your Moab glue alongside a Sabo in order to slow down the DTs enough, and also alongside glue strike as well in order to do more damage, in order for you to be able to pop the DTs on that round. And they weren't too hard at all, especially when they're all bunched up, meaning that every shell hits all of the DTs on that round. But got to round 91. The super fortified ceramics were more of a distraction than any annoyance, and really made it so that the BFBs on that round were harder to pop because of the fact that you have to divert your attention away. But also at the same time, the engineer is stealing a lot of pops from the Moabs, and the ice tower and the Sabos from the end of the track are stealing a lot of pops. Striker Jones is stealing a lot of pops. It's just unfortunately a tower which I cannot fathom out a strategy in order to fully utilize, or at the very least be able to use the same strategy that I employ in order to do a shell shock or a heavy shells or the big one 2 Megapops, which are towers which I have a lot of fun using, honestly. Like, I know there's a lot of tab and left clicking on the screen, but I honestly have a lot of fun playing around. And recently I discovered that bunny stuff does more damage to Moabs than rapid reload, so that is something that you should look into yourself. So I went on one of those really long custom maps which has like the maximum amount of RBS on the screen possible, and it wasn't hard at all to get through all of the rounds, but it took so long. In the 80s, in the 90s, the base mortar does 3 damage per shell, plus another 2 when a balloon is under a glue strike, plus another 1 with the stronger stimulant, alongside another +1 when it comes to ceramics and Moabs because of the acidic mixture dip when it's active. And then get this, level 20 artillery command from Striker Jones. Do you know how much damage it gives as a bonus to a base mortar. Well, if it has 3 to begin with, it adds another 3, doubling its damage, but it works from the base level when it comes to buffs. Buffs don't accumulate with other buffs, they only work from the base value. So all in all, you're getting a maximum amount of 10 damage per shell. But that is under artillery command, under glue strike, under the fact that it's a ceramic or a Moab, under the strongest stimulant. You're getting more damage from the buffs that you put to your tower than the tower itself, in which you are trying to get the 2 Megapops with in the first place. Like, there are other towers which is like that, but they are so much more manageable to try and work with. Like, I see a lot of the base wizard 2 Megapops on the Bloons TD 6 index, where you utilize water fire, which is actually a really powerful upgrade in order to utilize. So there are other, like the base start is a good example, because you can just buff that with super fan clubs, which is a strategy in and of itself. I did a base start 2 Megapops on logs like last year or something, but it's like, on its own, it's just such a weak tower, and there's nothing really you can really do to hugely boost the damage output from the base mortar. Like, obviously you can think of like support sacrifices for Sun Temple, but it's like you're putting so much money into that anyways, and it's not really financially possible in order to do all of that alongside the other things as well. So what I really want to do for the last segment of this video is just talk about my build order. So I either go for like a sub start, or on this map alone I went for a B start with the dinosaur, because once you're done with the dinosaur you can just place it off the track and it won't pop anything else, which is pretty good. It's a really good starting tower if you want to have something that pops first thing but then doesn't pop later on of your own choosing, kind of like a submersion support submarine. But then from there, a mortar, then Striker Jones, then upgrading the mortar. Then I would think from there getting yourself the alchemist in order to buff your mortar, because it only does so little damage, therefore any buff you give to it is a big increase. And then from there, either a village or a glue gunner. I would say village, just to further increase the attack speed of the mortar itself. And then from there, either a glue or a overclock engineer. But because of the amount of range in which the engineer has, it's really a big bane when it comes to a supported tower, because obviously you've got to either have it further, very far away from the track where it can't steal anything, or you put it behind an object, which obviously Cubism, there's a lack of objects, a serious lack of objects. Like, there's no objects whatsoever, so you can't hide your engineer. You can only place it far away enough from the track where it can't steal pop or steal balloons, steal pops from balloons. So yeah, this has been a, well, it's been a very arduous journey, just to say that out loud. It's not something that I would recommend for you to do. Now the ultimate question is a base mortar 2 Megapops possible? There's only one record of it on the Bloons TD 6 index, which has been done on logs using Geraldo and a Condor in order to reset the position of your Mo class balloons. But to be honest, I'm just not good enough at the game in order to utilize the Condor strategy. Like on Resort, it would work wonders, because you can reset your Moab's position from near the end of a track to the very beginning of a track, which would be awesome. But just to be clear, I'm not the best at this game, neither do I proclaim that I am one of the best people at this game. I have a certain set of skills which I think I'm okay with, but just to be honest, I still feel like I'm not a very good player at this game, especially comparing to people who can do 2 Megapops on, let's say, Dark Dungeons, or Bloody Puddles, or Castle Revenge, or Geared, or any other really, really difficult map. Like, I would look at those maps and think, I can't even fathom how to start this, let alone have a 2 Megapops friendly build where I don't have to worry about towers stealing too many pops away from my 2 Megapops intending tower. So to end all of this off, I actually did a successful run on Dark Path using the big one, because I was trying to test out to see if the burning stuff actually does more for the big one than the rapid reload does. And I have for you now a successful round 100 clip of that particular scenario. But to finish this all up, thank you ever so much to each and every single one of you for supporting me so far, for getting me to 10,000 subscribers. Your contribution, no matter how small or large, is really, really worth it. Thank you ever so much. I wouldn't think that somebody as silly as myself, or somebody with, I don't know, my lack of... I know this is kind of like a self-evaluation, but I don't find myself to be a particularly entertaining person, but maybe I am just my own worst self-critic. And I think we can all say that about ourselves. Like, sometimes we can all be our own worst critics. But anyways, I've kept you here for long enough for this outro. Thank you ever so much for watching, and looking forward to the next milestone, whatever it may be. It could be 50k, it could be 20k, versus around, or it could even be the big 100k for our yellow balloon death montage. But anyways, let's see that clip from Dark Path.
Leave this one for me.